Welcome to the podcast about stories from the center of the universe. I'm Daniel Lance.
I'm Paul Gilman, and this is Pod 1.
Caroline Slaughter is a voiceover actor, filmmaker, and podcaster. You've probably heard her before as the voice for brands such as Subway, Ford, and Holiday Inn. She just launched a podcast on iHeartRadio called Astray, which is an exploration into how far people will go for enlightenment. Caroline joined us to tell us about her story and how she got into podcasting, and then also to even graciously offer us some podcasting advice for our podcast. You can find more about Caroline's extensive body of work at www.carolineslaughter.com. So without further ado, here's Caroline. Cool. So Caroline Slaughter, welcome to the center of the universe. Our first guest under the new title.
Also the first person to suggest that we come up with a new title.
That's right.
Pod 1 just didn't seem to make much sense to anybody but Daniel and me. So here we are.
Wait, did you explain to your listeners what Pod 1 came from?
We never did.
Okay, can you just do it really quick? It is fun.
Go ahead, Daniel. It's all you now.
Okay. So where Paul and I kind of became friends was this restaurant, Pod 1, on West Broad Street in Richmond. And we were just kicking around name ideas when we first started this thing. And I'd heard of this podcast called Pod Save America, and somehow that kind of translated for me into Pod 1. And I was like, it's a play on, where we kind of became friends and where we love to get lunch. And then we end up, after we had named the podcast and we're already going through it, Paul's like, maybe we should look up what Pod 1 actually means, in case we are, because it's Vietnamese, because in case we're calling ourselves something pretty bad. But it actually means like number one pho. It's like the best pho. So we inadvertently named ourselves the Beck Podcast. And here we are.
That's not who we are. That's not what we were trying to be all about at the time, but it's kind of adorable that we stumbled into that. Good times. So Caroline, you and I connected because a mutual friend said, hey, Paul, if you really want to know how to podcast, you should probably talk to people that are really good at podcasting. And so we connected, and you've been gracious enough to talk to me one time before this recording, and certainly your willingness to do this tonight has been outstanding. And so I think we're going to talk a lot about your experience telling stories and certainly with podcasting, and I'm excited to hear that you have a podcast coming out soon that we should certainly talk about. But before we get into all that, where do you call home, Caroline?
I live in Atlanta, Georgia now, but I've also sort of been a nomad. So I lived, I was in Charlottesville. I grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia. And then I went to New York or Charleston for 2 years, but that doesn't really count, right? And then went to New York for school to finish up college. Then I went to London for like a month or so to do some theater stuff. And then I went to LA for 6 years, and then I came to Atlanta. So I've sort of bopped around. And I don't know where home is going to be, but right now Atlanta works.
Atlanta's kind of the new Hollywood a little bit, right?
Yeah. And especially during the pandemic, so many more people are moving here because it's affordable. People can have green space instead of being in their apartments in New York. And you're right. People are shooting here now. They're actually shooting the films and the TV shows. And they're starting to create more development here, which I don't know if you guys understand what that is, but it's like, writers' rooms and the people that are in charge are starting to move here. So that's been an interesting shift as well. Instead of just coming here to shoot and then getting out, they're building an infrastructure here.
Infrastructure that can care for start to finish producing of artistic endeavors. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really cool. And it's Atlanta's a neat place. I'm guessing I used to work down there. I'm guessing the traffic is not really a thing, even though more people are moving there since the pandemic.
What do you mean? Because of the pandemic?
Yeah.
The pandemic it's not a real thing in the South, right? I mean, so we still have traffic.
Oh, so wait a minute. Does anyone wear a mask in Atlanta?
They do. I mean, I'm joking. It's like people do wear masks, but you get into these pockets, which you probably run into as well in Virginia, where people aren't wearing masks or they're just more lenient about it. But I think since we've had a shift of power in government, a shift of leadership. I think people are more aware of it and are wearing masks more than they were. So
yeah, we've seen the same thing here in Virginia. All right, so when people ask you what you do for a living, what's your answer to that?
Well, I say I'm a storyteller. I mean, technically, I make money doing podcasts. I'm I say global voiceover because I don't know. I guess you can say you're a global voiceover because you do different jobs all over the world with different clients, but that sounds really pretentious. I'm never saying that again. I'm a voiceover. And I write, and I'm a filmmaker. I direct, and I've directed branded content. So I've sort of done all of these different things. So it's easier to just banner that under being a storyteller.
And what do you like most about storytelling?
I really like looking at themes or questions. Like for the new podcast I'm doing that's coming out March 3rd, the question is, what is the cost of enlightenment? And so really digging into that and being able to look at it from all these different angles. And as someone who's a storyteller, I don't think you can be black and white about anything. I don't think you should answer that question. I think you should present information and let the listener or audience member answer their own question. Because you guys are smart enough to do that, you know? And then it starts a conversation instead of being a blanketed statement about something.
And it allows nuance and careful consideration into the conversation too.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of what happens in my line of work is like about data and figures and numbers and stuff. But I don't know. Have you ever heard the quote that like humans are they consume information via stories more so than like raw data?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I think that's right. In terms of like storytelling, is that more like you are creating the story, or does the story already exist and you try to tell it in a compelling way?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think you're always crafting the story in your own voice. So if Paul looked at this story, what is the cost of enlightenment? He would have a completely different vantage point than I would. So I think you're always creating the story because it's your specific point of view. But sometimes stories, like, they do live, like this one is about these 3 men who've disappeared in Rishikesh, India, because they were on these quote unquote spiritual awakenings, like spiritual quests, trying to sort of figure out who they were internally. And they disappeared. And so that story is already there. The media's covered it. They've sort of like blanketed it. They basically labeled these men. They said they had India syndrome, which is something like you go to India, the culture shock, the spirituality, the different modalities of spirituality, all of this sort of like creates the psychosis in someone. They go crazy and they sort of fall off the grid. And so that story exists. But how I look at that story, and through interviewing the families and interviewing experts in India, that's a different construct. It's not the same story that other people have told. And I hope it's a story that digs deeper into an understanding around this. And even that question of what is the cost of enlightenment? Like, what does enlightenment mean to you, listener? So I hope that I'm always handing the baton over to someone else to answer their own questions. I hope that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So Caroline, tell us more about the podcast that's launching on March 3rd. Like, is it going to be 10 episodes in a season sort of thing, and then you'll switch to a different theme for the second season, or will you have a consistent theme or set of themes throughout?
Well, it's an 8 episode podcast. It's a narrative podcast. So it's something, we tell a story. It's like Serial, it's that sort of idea. It's an investigative podcast. And I'll read you, I actually brought this up because I knew that we were going to be talking about podcasts. So this is the log line. How far would you go for enlightenment? Westerners have long been drawn to the spiritual mystique of India, while many find what they're looking for and return home. Some vanish without a trace or even end up dead. Astray investigates those who pay the ultimate cost in search of spiritual awakening.
What's that second part? Is that like an echo?
No, I messed up the word, so I had to do it again.
Okay. I thought it was like,
guys.
Somebody says it and then there's an echo.
You can edit it. See, Daniel, you can edit that part if you want.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So it sounds better.
I thought you may have been saying it for emphasis. I wasn't sure what was going on there.
Me too. Spiritual awakening. Yeah, that's fascinating. That whole concept.
I think it'll be really cool. And there's this sort of, I don't know, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, but during COVID, people are looking for a sense of purpose and meaning, obviously. And we've been sitting with a lot of our own shit during this time. And so there's this idea that cults are going to be on the rise once we can sort of get out of hiding. And so this question of like, what is the cost of enlightenment, I think is an important one now, because people are going to be sort of seeking that after this.
Wait, so what's that again? People are getting holed up, and when things start to open up again, people are going to try to form cults?
No, I think, okay, I'm sure you guys have felt like this. Sitting with your own stuff during this time, you start to question, like, why am I here? What is my purpose? What is the meaning behind all this? Why is this pandemic happening? Why do I have to look at this stuff? Relationship stuff comes up, all of it. And we always want answers as humans. So there's this theory that after this ends, and I spoke to a guy who's a conspiracy theory debunker. He wrote a whole book on QAnon. We interviewed him for the podcast, and we were talking about this. And I said, I really do think cults are going to be on the rise because people want answers and they want belonging and they want community after being isolated and sitting with a lot of stuff that makes them uncomfortable. Humans do not like being uncomfortable. So I feel like coming out of this, they'll be looking for that. And people tend to follow people that have answers, you know? So that's why I'm thinking like cults might be on the rise. And he said, yeah, that's probably going to be a truth. So wow. It's just interesting. So that's why I think this podcast is somewhat well placed to have people start to answer their own questions instead of looking to someone else to answer them.
Yeah. And it's like, when I think of cults, I usually think that you're kind of closed off from the rest of the world. And that's part of the reason that it's so easy to just get totally caught up in it. But I see a lot of people online, on YouTube, on different parts of the internet that have a lot of answers too. And they're kind of building their own followings. And it's almost like people are in their solitude able to kind of build up their own echo chambers based on like what it is that they want to hear.
Yeah.
So
yeah, this conspiracy theorist debunker was like, yeah, those people are just really good talkers because no one has answers, you know?
Yeah, it seems to me that the only common denominator is confidence, you know, like people out there saying stuff with a ton of confidence and also might be really good at debating. And then they have like these massive followings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very nice. So suggestion for us, Caroline, or a question for you in our podcast. Daniel is 27. I'm 52. He's a vegan. I'm a meat eater. He doesn't drink alcohol. I drink alcohol. He's smart. I use 2-syllable words. Should we play on that in the podcast? The differences between the two of us?
Well, I wouldn't say you're not smart. So I think that that's the first thing I'd sort of discard. But I think that you guys already sort of, from listening to your podcast this morning, I feel like you guys already play on that because your personalities, like it's just who you are. You don't need to like yin and yang it and act it out, if that makes sense. People are drawn more to who you authentically are.
Yeah, just be natural, be organic about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
And always call Daniel out on being vegan. That's very important.
I should call him out.
Yeah, someone's got to bring it up. I'm always dying to bring it up.
Can I tell you one of the happiest moments in this podcast? We're talking to an NFL player. He's 45 now, but he's ripped. And he's talking about being a Cleveland Browns football player and how awesome that was. Even though they didn't win a lot of games, the fans were so passionate about the players in Cleveland. And he said they always wanted to know details like, what's your favorite food? And I said, okay, why don't you answer that question for us? What's your favorite food? And he's this giant athlete, like specimen of a man. And he said, my favorite food is broccoli. And I'm like, really? Broccoli? He goes, well, I'm a vegan. I've been a vegan for 10 years. And then what did you say, Daniel?
I think I don't know. It was a verbal, I just exhaled and it was awesome.
You beamed is what you did. And then you said, how do you get so big as a vegan? And then he said, I wake up at 4:00 in the morning and I sling 150-pound dumbbells, like Caroline, literally 150 in each hand. So 300 total. And I said, Daniel, how much do you weigh? It's 155 is the answer. So
155.
this guy's slinging two Daniels around working out at 4:00 in the morning. It's good times.
Okay, do you guys think that, I know Tom Brady's a vegan. Is he like part robot, part man? I mean, honestly.
He's not fully, he's not like me anyway. Yeah, there's something different going
not
on
human.
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah. I've heard the whole that he's vegan, but I've also heard that he like sometimes eats fish, and he has this like, I think, chef or diet planner that just really nailed down the perfect optimal diet for perfect optimal performance, and that's what he eats. But I don't know, especially after talking to Wally, the NFL player we just had on. People don't last in the NFL. Like people's bodies don't last. So there's got to be some kind of cybernetics under the hood.
Yeah. I think they're the first people that signed up, he and Giselle, to be like half AI, you know?
And the AI makes the human part just perfect, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah, there it is. All right. So Caroline, I think I expressed to you that Daniel and I enjoy talking to folks. We love to learn from them. We love hearing their stories. But we wouldn't mind making a couple of bucks. So how do you get paid to podcast? And by the way, we have earned, what are we? We're negative a couple $1,000.
Yeah. Deep in the red.
Yeah.
This is and I think I told you this too, Paul. It's like, for me, I was lucky enough to work with a company that's keyed into iHeartMedia. So iHeart basically funds the slate that the company School of Humans that I work for has. So they have a slate of 4 podcasts a year they have to get made. I have one of those podcasts coming out March 3rd. And so I don't really have to worry about promotion or any of that stuff, or even the payment stuff, because iHeart just funds it. That being said, if you want to find an iHeart or a Gimlet, or there's Spotify, there's a plethora of different platforms right now. People are this is my experience, people are very open in the podcasting world. So there's another podcast I was pitching around. I think I sent you the deck secretly, Paul, because it's important to sort of see it. So the deck is like a pitch. It has the log line on the front. I make it visual, even though it's a podcast, because you want it to feel like how it's going to be heard, if that makes sense. And then you introduce the hosts, and you introduce like the demographic. And I actually want to look at that, if you don't mind, because I think this might be important information.
Sure.
Go for it.
So the deck, the first page of the deck is sort of just the log line. Then you go into the synopsis of what the podcast would be. And then you go into comps, which are comparables. Like for us, let's say it's like Dolly Parton's America meets Malcolm Gladwell, so you're sort of comparing two things so people understand what it could be. Then for this one, it's a nonprofit. So there was an initiative. The collaboration is, what can we bring to the table for you, iHeartMedia? Why would you want to work with us? What are our assets? And then what are our asks? And then the team, you'll introduce, like, if it was, you two, and then if you had a producer. And then the last page is a contact page. And that's really it. So that's a deck. And I put pictures in this deck, sort of, like I said, so people can feel what it's going to be. And we do that in film too. When we put a deck together, we have visuals. And I think that just is important, because people want to have that overall experience of feeling something when they're looking at a deck. You send that to Gimlet, Spotify. You can find people's information pretty easily. And like the head of development, or whoever it might be, the head of the studio. And people are very receptive. I mean, they'll say no, or they'll say yes, or they'll say, let's have another conversation. But I've noticed that people are kind, and that there's not as many gatekeepers, because there's not the agents that you deal with in TV and film. So yeah, it's a fun, more receptive industry.
Yeah, it seems very positive, and it feels like people want to help people.
Have you noticed that? Have you guys noticed that?
Yeah. Well, not to a great extent, but I've talked to a couple of other podcasters, and they're like, "Hey, what can I tell you that helps your podcast?" And I told them I'd certainly return the favor.
Yeah.
It's been. I haven't had a negative experience yet with any of it.
Great. I love hearing that.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
cool. So you mentioned visuals from a PowerPoint presentation perspective. What about video of the guest or of us? Does that do anything to help us monetize the podcast or to make it more entertaining?
In my opinion, no. I mean, I think people choose podcasts just because it's an easy thing to pop in their ear when they're washing dishes or on a run or something. So I feel like the visual component, I wouldn't worry as much about it. That's just my own opinion.
Very cool. All right, so you told us that you told me a few weeks ago that Pod So One probably needed an update or an upgrade as a name for the podcast. We just shared the new name. Instead of critiquing the name, which you're certainly welcome to do, what should we be thinking about as we think about I think you're calling it the log line, either the title or the log line. How should we think about those?
Well, did you tell everyone why you came up with the name and what the new name is?
No, we just mentioned it tonight when we introduced you. Yeah, you want to do
Yeah.
it, Daniel?
Yeah, we can do that. And I think that we'll probably have like some Instagram posts or something leading up to it before this episode actually comes out. But the center of the universe is so the name of the podcast is Stories from the Center of the Universe, and Ashland has a nickname, the Center of the Universe, and Paul knows the backstory on that. And the idea is that each guest we have, for the duration of the podcast at least, we are all three kind of in the center of the universe, but at the same time there is no actual center of the universe, so we just get to kind of be. And one of our reasons for doing this is that it's kind of rare to sit with somebody with the sole intent of just like listening to their story and hearing about them. So putting the guest at the center, and the log line, what it means to be human / a podcast about the human experience, is I guess it's a more direct approach at trying to communicate why we're doing this, what this whole podcast is about.
Because like, what's your guys' why? Like, why did you start this podcast in the first place?
I think we should both answer. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know really. We're not sure, but we kept going, and so I was like, okay, instead of asking why we started it, how about we answer why we are still doing it, like why we haven't stopped. And it's a few reasons, but again, it's rare to sit down and just listen to somebody. We like to tell stories, and then these kind of they turn into like mini biographies a lot of the time, because the guest kind of tells their story, and we kind of have a posterity angle. So like, especially for older folks or anybody who's doing cool stuff and might want future generations to be able to listen to see, like, I think it'd be the coolest thing in the world for me to listen to my great grandfather on a podcast and be like, oh, so that's what he was like, but the technology wasn't there back then. So, that's another angle.
Yeah. And so just real quickly on the posterity point, like Daniel and I have recorded, I don't know, what is this? It's our 73rd recording probably.
Yeah.
And my son has listened to maybe 10 of them. And I didn't realize that until a couple of months ago. My two daughters have not listened to a single second of the podcast. But I hope someday when I'm on my deathbed, both of my daughters tell me they listened to a couple of them at least. Yeah. Well, so let's be really crisp here. The reason we started the podcast was somebody else suggested we try it, and we said, okay, sure, let's try it. And we started thinking about the themes that we'd love to talk about, and it really, after we recorded a few, boiled down to we just really want to hear people's stories, and if we can lay that down for posterity, and that's all this becomes, then that's cool by me.
Well, there's also this element that I've noticed just from speaking with you, Paul, of just connection. Like, human connection is just such a currency, especially right now. And that's something too to really amp up. Like, you guys, if you're putting someone at the center of the universe, or you've created this universe with the three of us in this moment, there is a connection that we all are hungry for, So that's something to really think about.
That's a great point. Yeah. And especially in these times.
I love that. I love that. So Caroline, let's talk about your background a little bit more. So you grew up in Charlottesville. Would you love to live in Charlottesville again?
I would. Like, there's a part of me that would. And there's a part of me too, because of this pandemic, where I'm like, I am traveling. As soon as this is over, I'm going to live here for a month and here for a month. And because I feel like so trapped right now. And thankfully, since I work remotely, I can travel pretty easily. So to answer your question, yeah, Charlottesville, but maybe when I'm in my 60s.
So retirement kind of place.
Sure.
What's the first place you're going to go to when you like travel a great distance?
We are going to go, my boyfriend and I are going to go to Mystique. Well, this is my play, right? This place where David Bowie he had a home, and it's gorgeous. And it's this really cool island. I got to look this up because it's just too cool. I just have to tell you about it. But we're going to St. John too. We might go to St. John before this whole thing ends, because they're being really careful about testing there. So you have to test before you get on the plane, and you test when you get there. And we just want to go to an island, go to a beach somewhere. I mean, aren't you guys hungry for water? Like just to look at an ocean? Or have you been to the ocean lately?
Go ahead, Daniel.
Oh man, that's a great. I haven't been super hungry for it, but I did go. The last place I saw the ocean, I think, was Paul's like river house place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I go to the river every chance I get. It's not the ocean water, it's not the expansive views, but it's still a pretty cool view.
Oh, you mean the river?
The river, yes. There's no second R. Yeah.
Where do you guys want to travel when this is over?
I want to go to Belize. I'm going to go to Belize.
Oh yeah, I could have predicted that.
I love that place. If that's my next move, that'll be my 6th time to that place. San Pedro's a little town off the Ambergris Caye, which is a peninsula that actually connects with Mexico to the north, and it's not connected to the rest of Belize. And it is the most gorgeous, most relaxed place. It's not typical for that part of the world to be able to go anywhere and converse with anybody that lives there year round or grew up there, and you can. They speak 7 languages. There are tons of ethnicities that are from there. And it's just a very relaxed, it's an awesome environment. I really wish the rest of the world was like that.
Dang.
What is it called? What's the little place in Belize called?
It's a little town called San Pedro. And it's on Ambergris, Ambergris Caye, which I think is Spanish for key. I'm guessing that, but anyway,
nice.
So the largest barrier reef in the world is actually off the coast of Belize, and Ambergris Caye is maybe 200 feet from that reef. It's actually longer and larger than the Australian Great Barrier Reef.
Wow. Yeah. That's some trivia.
There are probably a lot of great white sharks there too, aren't there?
I don't know, because we never went on the other side of the reef. It seems pretty tame on the land side of the reef.
I'm picturing that Finding Nemo scene where there's just like a drop off into the deep blue. So what do you call someone who's from Belize, out of curiosity?
What do you mean? Like American for America?
Like, yeah, the demonym or demonym. I don't know how to say it.
Are you saying big words again? Belizean is, I believe, what
Belizean.
Okay. Yeah. All right, so hold on. Let's talk about Mystique. What part of the world is that in?
Mystique, and I just looked this up because I was like, where is an island that feels like you're in the middle of nowhere? And Mystique is this private island in the Caribbean. And it's the reason I was really drawn to it, though, is really because of David Bowie. I mean, it's sick, but he has this really cool house there. And I was like, this would be awesome, even to rent it for just a night and be able to hang out in David Bowie's house. But it's also just any sort of island that's not sort of like done up, I want to go to, that where it feels rustic and you feel like you're the only person there. Sort of like, it sounds like this place in Belize is like that. That just appeals to me. Isolation. Why would I choose isolation again after this? But at least you're with an ocean.
Well, and you're in the open, and you would be around people. You could still have time to yourself, though.
Yeah, I like to draw a distinction between isolation and solitude, and I think what you're describing is more like solitude. Or with your boyfriend. Yeah, my fiance and I have talked about places that we want to travel, and a lot of them have like really deep history, like the Scottish Highlands or somewhere in Europe, like Bruges, this like medieval town in Belgium. Those kind of really, I don't know, there's something about them that are really attractive to me. So I'd like to head out there sometime.
That sounds great. I've heard. Are you guys Harry Potter fans?
Oh yeah.
I'm too old for that, Caroline. Sorry.
I love
Boom,
it.
I'm a millennial, baby. I grew up with Harry Potter.
What house would you be? What house? I know
Hufflepuff.
you'd be. No, I think you'd be Ravenclaw.
Oh yeah. I mean, I guess that's kind of the persona that I exude on the podcast, but I don't know. A lot of people that know me would call me a Hufflepuff. What about you?
I've been told that I would be a Ravenclaw with a Slytherin rising, which is very upsetting, and it's because I'm driven. That's why I've been told I have a Slytherin rising.
Yeah, ambition. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not a bad
ambition.
thing.
I wanted to ask you though. Oh, yeah. So the Scottish Highlands, there's this train. You know the train in Harry Potter, that
Yep.
beautiful. I think that's the train that goes through the Scottish Highlands, because my sister and I were talking about wanting to go on that train just because we're Harry Potter nuts.
Oh wow. Yeah, the Hogwarts Express.
Yeah.
So wait a minute. What house would I be in?
Oh, you'd be. What do you think?
Oh gosh.
By the way, this is not going to mean much to me.
I'm thinking it's either Gryffindor or like if you want to go with like the Paul self-deprecating like being dumb thing, then Hufflepuff. I don't think Slytherin. And then what's the last one?
Oh my god.
Ravenclaw.
Ravenclaw.
Yeah.
Ravenclaw.
You're probably a Gryffindor, Paul. I mean,
I think you just named almost all of them, right?
Yeah.
that was all four. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
That's
by the
a
way,
compliment.
what the,
Yeah, that's Harry Potter was in Gryffindor.
that's what everybody's looking for. Everybody wants to be part of Gryffindor.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it depends.
They're like
I'll
the
take
cool
it.
kids. They're like the brave ones, good, but they're also kind of like I kind of associate them with like the frat bros of the Harry Potter world, to an extent. But yeah, it's a good house. It's a good house.
Well,
Anyway,
so my only real exposure to Harry Potter is my oldest kid, my son, when he was 8 or 9, he read the first Harry Potter book and he was really into it. And he got to this part of I think it was the first book, it might have been the second, where they talked about the Slytherin kids. They were all following the blonde haired kid, whatever his name was. And they said his friends were sycophantically laughing at him. And my 8-year-old son comes to me and goes, "Dad, what does sycophantically mean?" I'm like, "I don't know." So I had to look it up, but that's how I learned the word sycophantic or sycophant or sycophantically. Thanks to Harry
wow.
Potter.
Yeah, it's a super common word now, so it's a good one to know.
I think it was pretty common back then. I just didn't know what it meant.
The woman who wrote Harry Potter makes more money than the Queen.
Yeah, still probably,
Dang.
right?
Yeah.
She's got royalties for the next 10 generations probably.
I mean,
That's
Hey,
yeah.
so,
I have
ahead,
just like a
David.
general back to like the industry kind of question,
Sure.
and like your career so far. Like it seems to me that it's kind of like in the music industry. There's like a huge amount of the people that are trying to make it, the sort of like starving artist type that are working other jobs, but like their dream is to kind of be a creator. And then there are very select few that just like skyrocket into fame and stardom. And there's like kind of these polar ends, but there's not a whole lot going on in the middle. Do you kind of get the sense that it's like that for the work that the industry that you've been in, podcasting and filmmaking?
yeah, absolutely. And it's like the only way to really make it is to be resilient and to understand that failure is not failure, that everything's just an experiment. So you can't, a lot of people want to quit when they fail, but it's really just a learning thing. And then also it's a lot of it's a lot of luck. It's a lot of luck.
F-bombs are allowed.
Okay, I didn't know.
It's all good.
It's just a lot of luck. I think people don't believe in that, but it's like it's opportunity meets preparedness meets luck.
I like
Wow.
it. Wait a minute. I have to think about that. Say those again.
Opportunity meets preparedness. So you're prepared, you're ready for this when the opportunity comes, meets a little bit of luck.
You get a little lucky. All right.
And the difference between luck and opportunity?
Opportunity can always sort of like show up, right? And I think luck is the right opportunity. Like, is it the right opportunity? Because I've been served a lot of opportunities and I've taken opportunities, but when the right opportunity comes in, you'll know. It's like there's ease to it. I don't know if you guys have this experience, but when anything feels like it's pushing a boulder up a hill, abort mission. It's usually not the right story to be telling at that time. If something starts to flow and things like for this podcast, we went through some bumpy stuff, but overall, it was like, this podcast needs to get made. It's important enough to get made. And there were never any boulders pushing up a hill. It was just like, oh, okay, this person's dropping out. We got to fill it with this person. So it was still flow. When there's flow, that's what you want in a project. And that's when you know there's a green light and it's a good opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it seems kind of like an analog to this concept in the startup community of pivoting versus persevering. That's like the eternal question. If you're struggling, if you're trying to make a startup happen, and you're running into issues and struggling, should you pivot into something else, change the product or change the way you're doing things, or should you just stick it out? And unfortunately, there are stories on both sides. Like there was I think the origin story of Airbnb was very much like pushing a boulder up a hill. Like these guys were living on ramen for months and months and months, and everybody heard the idea of like, oh yeah, just let a stranger stay in your house for money, and they were like, that's crazy, I'm never going to do that. And so they had to really fight for a long time, but they just kept pushing they just kept persevering, and then it ended up paying off. So it's yeah, go ahead.
Well, I would argue that they probably pivoted within there. So like, because they realized that log line was not working, so they probably pivoted their idea around how they were going to pitch it, and therefore found someone that was like, okay, I get it.
That's a good point. But like the overarching kind of concept stayed the same, but within it, there was a lot of changing and adapting and flowing to try to get to the end. Okay.
Yeah.
I can dig that.
And maybe this is just something for me, just because I do have a lot of opportunities that present themselves. So I just know, well, one, I want to work with kind people that are collaborative. And two, if things don't flow pretty instantly and you don't have that sort of back and forth thing, it's just, there's too much other stuff I need to be working on. So those are just pinnacles for me.
There are too many other opportunities. Yeah.
Hey, Caroline, when we first spoke, did you suggest that we get an intern?
Yes.
We got an intern.
Oh, great.
We changed the name of the podcast and we got an intern because of you, Caroline.
Oh, I love that. That's going to help a lot.
Well, she's a senior in college. She's got 3 months before she graduates. The cool thing is she's a third culture kid like Daniel was. She grew up all over the world, State Department parent. And she's awesome. And she says she loves social media. She I think likes what we're doing. And yeah, we're excited to have her on board.
I mean, it might be fun if you want to do something for social media where people just say hi in the beginning of the podcast on film, and then you could put that on your social media and then link it back to the podcast so people know what's sort of coming up.
That's brilliant. I love it.
Wait, say that one more time. Like we would take a picture of you saying hi.
Daniel, were you not paying attention?
No, it just kind of went over my head. Like,
so you record, like you would record me, like I'd be like, hey, my episode's coming out X, Y, and Z. It's so nice to meet you guys. And then you'd cut that little slice, put it on Instagram so that people know when my episode's coming up. And then, that would sort of be a way to market the.
Yeah. Nice.
Do we want to do that at the end, Caroline?
Sure.
Okay, cool. I love it. So what else should our intern do so I don't have to do anything but show up? I'm mostly kidding.
Definitely focus on social media. She can start to look up some names for you guys of, and I think Paul, I said I would share a couple of those names with you of heads of development or people that are sort of the gatekeepers for the podcast stuff so that you can start trying to send. I would recommend creating a deck and trying, really understanding what you guys have to say on this. And I think you're getting clearer and clearer with that, the second time I've talked to you, Paul, so that you can start to figure out if there's a way to get paid to do this or just reach a larger demographic. So I'd have her start looking to see where those opportunities would be, or even just finding people on LinkedIn. And what else should she do? She should edit that one part that I messed up on earlier. That's what
that's still going to be Daniel.
Yeah. I do have a more general question about the so your podcast that you presented to iHeart and that you're going to be doing has a beginning and it has an end. And what Paul and I are doing is like sort of this, let's just keep going. You know, no, we don't have a concept of seasons or a beginning and an end really. Does that, like, is it easier to sell these sort of networked kind of podcast companies if you have a very clear, here's the beginning, here's the ending, here's the concept?
Well, you know, I think like, I mean, I would say that like Joe Rogan and there's quite a few like talking heads podcasts, right? I'm actually going to pull this up. And people want that too. They want those weekly podcasts that can sort of fill that void. And they don't just want narrative. And I think I shared this with you earlier, but what I mean by a log line or by something having more of an idea of your voice and what you present is like Dak Shepard. So his log line is Welcome to the Armchair Expert, a podcast that celebrates the messiness of being human. And I would think, I mean, just from hearing his podcast and watching him do TV and stuff, like that sort of personifies who he is. So like people have an idea of what they're going to get when they listen to that podcast. So I think that's what I would say to you guys is if the more you can sort of fine tune what people are going to get when they listen to your podcast, that's going to help sell it to a bigger platform. And another example is Brene Brown and her podcast, Unlocking Us. So her log line is conversations that unlock the deeply human part of who we are so that we can live, love, parent, and lead with more courage and heart. And that's totally Brene Brown. So that's what I would just push you guys to do is to really fine tune what you bring to the table.
And it sounds like there are a bunch of people doing all kinds of variations on humanness and what it means to be human and human this and that, you know?
Yeah, we are super generic at this point.
Yeah. yeah.
I mean,
we have a lot of carving to do.
But that's what you would say. Look, there's so many different filmmakers that tell the same story, but we all have a different point of view on that story. So I wouldn't say that at all.
I like that perspective. Yes, that just gave me more confidence in what we're doing.
And in listening to you guys, like I was listening to your podcast this morning, like you do ask insightful questions and you bring yourselves into the conversation and you use it as a place to reflect. So yeah, you're not doing the same thing as other people. Okay. I love that. Thank you, Caroline.
Yeah.
All right. So Caroline, you're a storyteller and you and I chatted about a screenplay. Can you talk about the screenplay that you might, I'm saying screenplay, that may not be the right word. You know, the one about the brother? Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm sort of in a place right now, which is a holding pattern with it, where I'm talking to another screenwriter about writing it with me. So I don't know if I can really go into depth about it, Yep.
but I can say this because Paul has a background in the military, which is so interesting to me. It's a story about vets. That's not the normal story that you would hear when it comes to the military. And it sort of it looks at masculinity, it talks masculinity, and really examines that through a comedic lens. So that's all I can really say about it. But it's something that I hope does justice to what you guys deal with, Paul, when you come back from being deployed, and sort of what it means, that feeling of becoming a civilian again. Yeah, I'm one of lots of folks that have been through that experience, and I would gladly share those experiences in detail, Caroline, if we have the opportunity. I would, and I would love for that to get out there, and love for people to know that it's okay to go through those experiences. Daniel and I, part of this podcast, if we talk about mental health in any way that becomes useful for the listener, we're very open to those sorts of things. Yeah, it's important, especially 100%. During a pandemic. My gosh. I know. I'll hopefully I can tell you guys more, next time we speak, but yeah, it's sort of growing now. And so I have to let the story grow without telling too much right now. No, that's really cool. That's awesome. And I really look forward to that becoming a movie, right? Yeah. I want to shoot it in Charlottesville. So there are definitely worse places on earth to shoot a film like that. And you guys can be extras. Hey, hold on a second. I want to be like, what do you call the subject matter experts that you talk to help you with the writing of the? Oh yeah, you're right. A consultant. I want to get credit as a consultant, Caroline, and I want to be known as extra and pick a number.
I would love to be an extra. I think that'd be great, as long as I'm not like a dead person. If I was like I'd like to be walking or something like that.
If
Talking
you're a
and doing
dead
something.
person, you get paid more though, because you actually have time on screen where people are focused on you. So they're pros and cons.
Oh,
Well, actually,
interesting.
no, because some people in the background are dead too, right? In war movies. So never
Yeah,
mind.
so there's one of my friends was an extra in Lincoln, and there's a lot of dead bodies in that show. So
Oh,
I don't
yeah,
know which one he was.
never mind.
Hey, so
Yeah.
Caroline, you're in I guess a studio, we would call it,
Mhm.
a physical location. How big is that room?
Oh my God, I can't do math. I'm creative.
No, roughly 4 feet by 10 feet.
Yeah, it's probably something like that.
Yeah. I mean, what was it before you converted it?
So basically, there's this guy I think he's in Spain, and he has these, they're called studio bricks, and they're these amazing studios that you can build almost like Legos, and they're really heavy pieces, and you put them together and it builds this awesome studio with, like, the only thing that's a bitch to put in is the soundproof door. It's just so heavy. So when we were building it, we put it on the opposite way, and that was just a no-no. It was just awful. And then we had to like tear it all down again. But that being said, it's a really nice studio and you can move it places. And as you can hear, it's great. It's easy. Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Would it break the bank for us?
Yeah, it's like $7,500.
Woo.
Or
And
at
That's
I'm
a
least-
bank breaker.
Is
yeah.
it? Maybe.
Yeah.
I think it's 7,500. It might be 17 though. I can't remember. But Studio Bricks is the name of it.
All right. I'm writing that down.
Nice.
I ended up buying it because I got a really big Subway commercial or campaign. So I was the voice of Subway. So it was like a very good payday. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to invest in my voiceover career. And that's how I was able to buy it.
Wait a minute. Let's talk about voiceover career. So from the time somebody says, "Hey, we want to hire you," to the time that your recording or that advertisement hits the airwaves, what's that process like typically?
Oh my God, it's the best job ever. So basically, you audition for something. Your agent, then if you got it, your agent will call you and be like, they chose you. And you're like, yes. And if it's a union campaign, you're like, payday. And so you just go in for Subway. It was a campaign. It was like I was in the booth like 3 days and I got paid enough for a year. Like it was really nice.
Wait a minute,
What-
3 days, and you're basically
You're set.
providing what, a minute of content?
For that it was radio and TV, and it was like, I mean, it was TV that was showing during, it was a commercial that I think showed during fall football. So like every time that thing shows, you're getting paid, you know? So yeah, it's not a lot of content.
How
Wow,
would we
so-
how would we find that commercial with your voiceover?
Oh, you could probably Google, or I can send it to you. I'll just send
Okay.
it to you.
Well, we probably heard your voice already once before.
Yeah, I mean, I like did Holiday Inn. I'm like I do a lot for IBM, so yeah. But
And do you?
Go
Is that more of like a hustle while you're trying to do your primary kind of creative work?
it's like a nice job, you know. It's a really nice job. I love the people that I work with in voiceover. I really appreciate my agents. I probably should push it a little bit more, but I'm sort of busy right now. But I've loved it.
And what is it about, like, what makes people, like, what makes your voice win? You know, what makes a good voiceover voice?
I think it's someone who really shows up exactly as they are and is able to sort of portray that through the copy and make it their own. It's the same as being a really good actor. It's like I was talking about Robert Downey Jr. tonight, and I feel like someone like him, he just shows up exactly how he is, and he owns the role and he owns the script. And there's something about that that's really compelling. There's no apologies for who you are. And for me, I've run into issues because, and I've done this, I think I'm doing this in the podcast now, which I'm trying to be aware of, but I'll manipulate my voice because I think someone wants to hear it be more mysterious. And my sister was like, oh God, no, don't do that. Like, just be yourself. So I'm trying to work on that a little bit because I think the more that I'm myself, the more that resonates for the ear.
I think
Yeah.
that's right. That's how you get to ownership, I think.
Mhm.
Is getting there authentically. That's really cool. So Daniel, that you called it studio bricks. That's in our future, dude.
All right, Paul. Well, I don't know. It might not be a 50-50 deal. Just letting you know.
It's all good.
No, yeah, that's great.
Cool. Well, Caroline, we said we were going to try to go 40 to 50 minutes. I think we're at about that moment. It's awesome having you on.
If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe through whichever app you're using. To share your thoughts, head over to our website at podso1.io, and there you can comment on episodes or send us feedback directly. Thanks for listening.